And this is so important because we're all breathing. It's something that we all do every day. And because it's such a natural function, I think a lot of us are taking this for granted. We know we need to breathe to survive, but it might not always be something that we're doing really intentionally. So, to start our conversation today, will you share with us a little bit about how you personally were interested in breathing and its impact on health? What did that journey look like for you?
Yeah, great question. So it's a variety of things. I've been introduced to the concept of breathing and breath work and poo pooed it and kind of ignored it because it was too simple for me. And of course, some of us practitioners, we like to make things really complicated. And then we eventually learned that simplicity is the answer. And that's the best way for us to actually get our message out there is by finding simpler interventions. So my story actually starts by me attending a Wim Hof training. And this was almost 8 years ago now. A friend of mine said, "Hey, do you want to go to a Wim Hof training?" And I said, "Sure." He's like, "Bring your swim trunks." I'm like, "I thought we were going to a breathing class." And he's like, "Trust me." So we go to this breathing class. And by the end of it, I was able to hold my breath for 3.5 minutes, longer than I ever have in my life. And then they took us outside. It was February on a freezing cold day. And they had a kiddie pool filled with ice cubes for us to kind of not jump into, but for us to sit in and practice our breathing while immersed in a cold bath or a cold plunge. And we were able to do that and survive the 90 seconds that we were in there. And then we didn't have towels to dry ourselves off. The challenge was to use our breath and our body heat that we generated using a technique called tumo breathing to dry ourselves off. So here we are in the freezing cold winter, February winter in Toronto, coming out of a cold plunge and then drying ourselves off by moving our bodies and breathing in a rhythmic way. I just felt so alive. If you had told me I was going to do that, I wouldn't have gone. But after I was done, I felt so alive and invigorated. And it just like turned on and piqued my interest about how breathing can have such a profound shift in my mood. And then in 2020, when the world seemed to kind of shut down and everyone went into a cave with a respiratory infection, I read James Nestor's book. And around that same time, my son was going through some dental challenges. Growing up as a child, we later learned he was a habitual mouth breather, which caused him to have a lot of cavities, even, despite the fact that he was eating a very functional medicine approved diet. No gluten, no dairy, no sugar, no junk, no sodas, and all that good stuff. But he had a ton of cavities, but it was actually because he was mouth breathing. But we also went to the dentist this one time, and the dentist told us that there wasn't enough room for his adult teeth to grow in because he had an overcrowding issue. And as a chiropractor, I thought that can't necessarily be true or doesn't make sense to me because there's no way God made us to have, a jaw that can't accommodate our teeth. Something else is going on here. And it turns out because of his habitual mouth breathing and because his tongue was resting in the bottom of his mouth, it didn't act as a spacer to open up his upper palate, his hard palate. And so he didn't have too many teeth. He had too little jaw. And so we found an airway dentist to actually help expand his jaw. And all of his teeth came in. We didn't have to remove any of them. And now he's got a beautiful, wide smile, which also means he's got a nice open air palate. And around the same time, as we were seeing the airway dentist, my wife, who I've been given permission to share this, who also grew up with cavities, despite having a very clean diet and also having a very good dental hygiene practice, we later came to learn that she was also a mouth breather. And she also sucked her thumb as a child because her tongue would not sit in the roof of her mouth due to a tongue tie. And so she ended up getting a tongue tie procedure done, which is just a small laser surgery. And that completely changed her life. It changed her posture. It got rid of aches and pains that she would complain about. She was able to touch her toes very easily for the first time. And her body just melted. Her fascia just melted with relaxation. So, how we breathe isn't just about the air that's going in and out of our lungs. It's also about how it shapes our facial structure. And so for me, it's impacted my son, my wife. It's impacted me in many ways. And in 2021, I became a breathwork facilitator, and that's allowed me to allow others to experience transformations through breath by taking them on very mystical journey is kind of hard to describe what people go through, but it's pretty magical. And it's been wonderful to be able to do that. And now I educate practitioners all over the world about the science and art of breathing. So that's where my story starts. And I'm just scratching the surface. So there might be questions I don't know the answer to, and I'm continuing to explore. And there's lots of things that I've learned, which I'm excited and happy to share today.
Well, I can see why you feel so compelled to talk about this and to share with others. I mean, that is a massive impact it's had just on your family. And I'm sure as you train practitioners and even your social networks, you probably see so many stories, kind of transformative stories like that when one starts to work on their breath, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so many. I mean, it's the one
Yeah.
thing that I love because it creates the fastest, most measurable shift in somebody's physiology and the way they feel. And as we go through this conversation, people will learn why. And I hope this inspires them, no pun intended, to take action and take control of their breath.
Well, on that note, can we talk a little bit about just about this term breath work? Because I think a lot of times when people think breath work, they think, okay, I'm just going to sit still and I'm going to take some deep breaths. Will you tell us a little bit about how you define or interpret or explain what breath work really is?
Yeah, I think when people, like you said, when people think of breath work, they think of like Wim Hof, or they think of intense breathing practices like
Yeah.
Tumo, or they think of acrobatic breathing techniques, and it doesn't have to be that. The way I define breath work is working on your breath. So anytime we bring our conscious awareness to our breath, I believe that's breath work. And it could mean different things in different situations. But anytime that we're drawing our attention to our breath, being present to it, and then modulating it and adjusting it to choose how we want to feel, that's working on our breath. It could be breathwork exercises you're doing, it could be breathwork experiences you're having. I even think something as simple as mouth taping is working on your breath. So I do breath work. People ask me, like, what's your breathwork practice look like every day? I'm working on my breath 24/7. In fact, I do 8 hours of breath work every night when I'm sleeping because I use mouth tape. Throughout my day, I'm bringing my awareness back to my breath, literally hundreds and hundreds of times. And I'll share with people how they can do that. And when you do that, then you are now in control of your nervous system. In fact, I look at the breath as the steering wheel of the nervous system. And so, because just like when we're driving, we can drive unconsciously, we can get to and from work without even knowing how we got there, we can drive very consciously, right? Both hands on the wheel, being present and paying close attention to the road around us and the road in front of us and behind us and all that good stuff. We can do that with our breath. And when we do that, we unlock a whole new level of health that's been waiting for us all along. Literally, the answer is right under our nose. We just have to know how to access it and raise awareness around it.